Good morning, Anne-Marie Williams, Deputy Program Manager for Gender and Development within the Directorate of Human and Social Development of the CARICOM Secretariat. Anne-Marie, thank you for joining me for this discussion on CARICOM's preparatory meeting ahead of CSW 66.
Thank you.
Before we get into CARICOM's preparation, tell us about CSW.
Well, the Commission on the Status of Women, CSW, is an intergovernmental body which is responsible for gender equality and empowerment of women and girls. It's a functional corporation of the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, and it was established in 1946.
Okay. So we have a number of preparatory meetings ahead of the main meeting in March. There is going to be the first meeting on the 3rd of February and another meeting on the 17th of February. Tell us about that meeting on the 3rd.
The meeting that we're having on the 3rd of February is really a sensitization meeting, sort of a preparation for the 17th meeting, and also a preparation for ministers and partners to really look at a zero draft that was done by the Gender and Development Program here at the CARICOM Secretariat, to really have member states add to and contribute to this draft. And this draft will be finalized on the 17th. And the draft is done under the priority theme of CSW, which is achieving gender equality and women's empowerment in the context of climate change, environmental, and disaster risk reduction policies and programs. And so all the different aspects of gender and climate change is framed in that draft. And that draft, like I said before, the member states will contribute to shape the draft to represent what the region looks like. And that draft will be incorporated in what is known as the agreed conclusions, which is a final document coming out of the Commission on the Status of Women, the 66th session this year.
It's a very interesting focus of this year's CSW, framing women empowerment and equality issues in respect of climate change, the environment, and disaster. So tell us the importance of that. We usually hear women empowerment in terms of, gender equality, in terms of, domestic violence, and so on. So how important is it for issues related to women's empowerment and equality to be placed within that kind of framework?
Okay, everything is framed within the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, and there are 17 goals. The chief goal that we're looking at is goal 5, which is gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. But it is difficult to achieve gender equality if the other 16 goals are not met. And goal 13 is the climate goal. And so we know that women and men, boys and girls, are affected differently by natural disasters or natural hazards. And they're affected differently largely because of gender inequalities. We have inequalities that are socioeconomic, inequalities based on one cultural beliefs. And whenever we find women in these conditions, it's not only a woman, like you would say, well, all women are the same. No. Women are not homogeneous, but when we look at women in climate change issues, we look at women in all their diversity. So we think of indigenous women, we think of rural women, we think of women who are members of the LGBT community, migrant women. All these women are affected differently by climate change. And so this is an opportunity for member states to really zero in on the policies and programs that they can put in place, gender-responsive policies to help their member states and to help women to recover from. And well, before we get to the recovery, it would help them to really prepare for look at issues that will mitigate climate change and disaster risk reduction. And that will be better for the entire SIDS, or the small island developing states, that our CARICOM region is classified as.
I want to break that down into some specific examples of how uniquely or how distinctly we should look at women in terms of the environment and climate change and disaster risk reduction. So if you were to identify some specific niche areas that are going to be discussed in the preparatory meetings on the 3rd and the 17th, what would some of those be?
Well, there's 2 panels on the 3rd that will look at. First, we have our guest speaker, Asha Kambon. And Asha Kambon is a gender specialist, but she's also very well renowned in the area of climate change and disaster risk reduction. So she's our guest speaker. But there's also 2 other panels that we will be looking at CSW negotiations around the climate crisis, because the same zero draft I spoke to you about, that draft has in these different aspects of climate change that member states usually negotiate to find the right verbiage and the right language as to how to set out the agreed conclusions. And so that panel will provide a framework for what is to be looked at in terms of the climate negotiation for the Commission and the status of women. We know that COP has just finished, COP 26, and out of COP 26, there's a gender portion that speaks to women and climate change and how to prepare for these issues. An important aspect of the data around climate change, there's a climate fund that speaks to women getting opportunities to tap into this fund. But there has to be specific data too, so that we can measure how women have benefited from this fund. And so all those things will be spoken about in that panel discussion. We will also look at how disaster affects women and men differently. And what are some of the policies and programs that we need to put in place in order to help women to prepare for, react to, and recover from these issues brought on by climate change.
Okay. If you were to do like a state of CARICOM's response, or CARICOM member states' response to putting women and girls into issues and policies and programs pertaining to gender, pertaining to the environment, what would be a best practice? Could you identify a best practice in the region?
Well, there's the Engender project in the region that UN Women is in charge of. That project has been looking at ways to mitigate the climate crisis, and they're also looking at policies and programs to help women to respond in a gendered way to climate change. But chiefly too, there's lots of awareness raising around the issue, because climate change is not a new thing. It's not new, but it's been looked at with fresh eyes, because we all know today that, yes, we're feeling the heat is getting hotter. 2 days ago, I saw that NASA had out some data saying that this year is the 6th hottest year on record. And in 30 years' time, it will be worse. And so we notice that not only that the days are getting hotter, but temperatures are rising and they're becoming more extreme. So the good thing is that in our region, our member states are some of them, but we want all of them to look at policies and programs to help women and girls, men and boys, but particularly women and girls, because women are almost the invisible aspects of climate change because of the work they do. Women are usually inside doing a lot of unpaid care work, taking care of the family, while maybe men are outside putting up the shutters, or sometimes they're just outside buying the time, but women are sort of invisible in this entire process, and they get the brunt of the disasters and the issues coming out of climate change. So an awareness is very important for member states to start with. Most of the member states have their gender policies. Some of them have climate policies. And it's an incorporation as to how women will fare. What are they putting in place? Strategies and programs for women to mitigate the climate crisis.
Mm-hmm. Anne-Marie Williams, thank you so much for spending this time with us to really bring visibility to CARICOM's preparatory meeting ahead of the 66th session of the Commission on the Status of Women early March. Is there anything else you would like to leave with us as we close?
Well, it's just to say that the CARICOM preparatory meeting, we're doing it this year in collaboration with our partner UN Women. And Parliamericans is also involved in the sensitization session. But why it's important for the community to gather? Because this is a unique region. The region is very prone to natural disasters, prone to hazards, and it's an opportunity for member states to collaborate and organize around its own needs and priorities to take into CSW 66. Because we know that even though we're one block, we have mainland territories and we have island territories. Belize has the second largest barrier reef in the world. So some of the issues affecting Belize will not be the same issues affecting Guyana. Although Belize and Guyana has similar topography, but look at Barbados, look at Jamaica. So it is an opportunity for us to come together and harness what we have and try to protect all the beauty and the diversity that this region has as we go into CSW 66.
Well, we hope you will keep us informed as we formulate the positions CARICOM will take into CSW 66 and even to inform us about the outcomes of that global meeting in March. Thank you again.
Thank you too.